Hey everyone, Huion here. Today I'm reviewing the Huion Kamvas Slate 11 and Kamvas Slate 13. You can think of these Android tablets as the follow-up to the Huion Kamvas Slate 10, which was released last year or 2 years ago. First of all, disclaimer, these are review units provided by the company, and in this video I'll just present to you my findings so that you can decide whether they are worth the money. At the time of review, the Kamvas Slate 11 is US $299 and the Kamvas Slate 13 is $459 US. As usual, let me give you the bottom line up front. Both tablets are using the MediaTek Helio G99 processor and they have 8 gigs of RAM each. The smaller tablet comes with 128 gigs of storage, the bigger tablet has 256 gigs, and they come with the microSD card slot so you can expand the storage easily. Overall performance of the tablets is smooth for multitasking and for drawing. Both tablets come with LCD displays, and this 11-inch has a 16 by 10 aspect ratio, and both tablets have the matte glass surface which provides quite a nice tactile drawing experience, and the reading experience is very good thanks to the anti-glare. Huion mentions color support for 99% sRGB and contrast ratio of 1000, and from what I can see, the contrast on the 11-inch doesn't look that good, as in you can see the highlights here, they are kind of blown out, but the colors look okay. For the 13-inch, I can see more detail here, but the colors, they look a bit more saturated than usual. These are still considered budget tablets, and for budget tablets usually the audio quality isn't that good, and the audio from the four-way speakers on these tablets is so-so. Battery life is good. For the small tablet I can get around 10 hours of battery life at maximum brightness, and for the larger tablets it's around 7 to 8 hours. Downsides, the pen performance unfortunately is not that good. Initial activation force is quite high, so when you draw with minimal pressure, the lines will just break even though the pen tip is still in contact with the display. And when you draw diagonal lines, let me just reduce this down. When you draw diagonal lines, there is diagonal line wobble and jitter. And the amount of wobble and jitter will vary depending on the app you use. So for MediaBank, it's actually still usable. This is Clip Studio Paint. And there is diagonal line wobble and also pressure variance. So here you can see some pressure variance and you can see some diagonal line wobble. This pen, the Huion H pencil, supports 4000 levels of pressure sensitivity and tilt sensitivity, and tilt, from what I can see, only works well with this app Sketchbook. Palm rejection does not work well, so when drawing, sometimes the canvas will just zoom or move because of accidental finger gestures, and quite often, see, it happened again, and accidental undos can happen quite frequently, which is very frustrating. So the workaround is to just disable finger gestures altogether and just keep the pen zoom and rotate gestures, or just wear the artist glove that is included. The pen has one side button which is customizable depending on the app you are using. Now the pen performance is definitely not good enough for creating professional art, and when you're using this pen with the various drawing apps, at least for me, I always have to look for a workaround. For example, with this app Concepts, I have to look for the best brush, which is the pencil brush that can still draw without the diagonal line wobble. With other drawing apps, the amount of diagonal line wobble will just vary. And with Clip Studio, let me just show you CSP. So CSP on this tablet uses the phone user interface, which is okay here. This is the so-called studio mode. If you switch over to simple mode, you get the 5 tools at the bottom, and this is not very productive for drawing. On the larger tablet, you get the full desktop user interface, and if you switch to simple mode, you also get the simple mode of the desktop UI. But for the 11-inch tablet, you cannot switch the UI to this UI. The UI that Huion has provided is very simple, and for this Android OS, you get the bare minimal features. Anyway, there's Google Play Store, so you can always find an app or install your own launcher to get more features. The pen performance reminds me of USI pens, but I do not have another USI pen to test, so I can't tell you whether this is really using USI technology. But from what I can see with the diagonal line wobble and palm rejection not working that well, it feels very USI to me. So the pen performance is definitely not good enough for creating professional art, and the pen performance will vary quite noticeably depending on which app you use. So for high paint, this app is actually still okay with some, well, diagonal line wobble, but it's much better compared to Infinite Painter and Clip Studio Paint. But these two tablets really are more for beginners and kids who are not too discerning. I mean, if you buy a tablet like this and give it to your kids, they are going to be very happy. They are not going to think too much about the diagonal line wobble. I mean, they are just happy to get a tablet. So due to the issues with pen performance, you always have to find ways to work around those issues or limitations. For example, with palm rejection not working that well, you have to wear the artist's glove or just draw without having your palm on the display. If tilt sensitivity is not working well, don't use tilt brushes. If there is diagonal line wobble, if there's too much diagonal line wobble, you can increase the smoothness of the brush at the expense of adding more latency. So that's the bottom line for these two tablets. And now let's move on to the full review. Let's take a look at the items included in the box. Oh, before I do that, I have a favor to ask from you. If you have the intention to buy these two tablets or any tablets that I have reviewed, consider using the affiliate links that I have for you in the video description below to support my YouTube channel and the work that I do here. This is how the packaging boxes look for the Kamvas Slate 11 and 13. The boxes have the same items inside. There is a flip case, the tablet, the user manual, a pen, one artist glove, a SIM ejector tool, 3 replacement pen tips, and lastly one USB-C to USB-C charging cable. No charger is included. This pen supports 4000 levels of pressure sensitivity and there is 60 degrees of tilt. I'm not sure what's the material that's used to make the body, but the build quality seems solid enough. And that's the USB-C charging port. So there is a battery inside. But this pen does not require Bluetooth for pairing. There is one side button which may be customizable depending on the app you use, and that's the pen tip, which is replaceable. The pen tip is firm and has no movement when in contact with the display. There is palm rejection, but it doesn't work that well, and I will talk more about that later. So the design of the pen is almost cylindrical except for this flat side here, and the surface is matte textured, so this is quite comfortable to hold. Now one downside to this pen is it's powered by battery, and there is no way for you to attach the pen to the side of the tablet for charging because it uses the USB-C port for charging. So if you're outdoors and you are using the pen and the pen runs out of battery, you will not be able to charge the pen unless you have a USB-C to USB-C charging cable with you. And because this pen does not use Bluetooth, there is no way to check the battery life of the pen. I do not know the battery life of the pen, but it would be good, to charge the pen before you bring it out, unless you want to bring out a USB-C to USB-C charging cable. Let's take a look at the flip case. So the pen can be stored here, and this silicone cover is actually attached to the flip case. So you can prop up the tablet like this. So that will look like this. And you can fold the flap here so that the case will take up less space on the table. Or you can push the tablet forward so that the tablet is lower. And this may seem like a good angle for drawing, but when you press down, the tablet is just going to slide down because the slot or the groove here is not that deep. So for drawing, you may want to, just fold the case like this. Just fold it so that you can sort of prop up the tablet. This is just one way of folding. The other way is to do it like this, if I'm not wrong, by the way. Yeah, so it does the same thing, just different ways of folding. There is a cutout here, so when the pen is in the pen holder, you can push from the hole behind to take the pen out easily. The flip case has this texture inside and this PU-like texture on the outside. And I noticed a little scratch here already on this new case, so perhaps this scratch against something earlier. So this flip case provides protection on all sides, and it does not make the tablet too thick or heavy. And this is the camera cutout. This case also supports auto wake and sleep. Let's take a look at the design of these two tablets. So this is the Huion Kamvas Slate 11 and this is the 13, and the size difference is quite obvious. So this has an 11-inch display. The resolution is 1920 by 1200, so the aspect ratio is 16 by 10. And the resolution for this bigger tablet is 2176 by 1600. The aspect ratio is 4 by 3. Corners for the bigger tablet are rounder compared to the smaller tablet, and the LCD also have rounded corners. Here's a look at the back. Both are matte textured, and if I'm not wrong, this is metal. So the build quality for both tablets is excellent. On the smaller tablet, there is one camera and one flash. On the bigger tablet, there are two cameras and one flash. Now, the matte textured surface is quite susceptible to fingerprints. On the top of 11, there are two speakers and there are two more at the bottom. And the audio quality is clear. I will not say the audio is hollow, which is good. So the audio is actually pretty decent. On this side, we have the power button and volume controls. At the bottom, there is the micro SD card slot and the USB-C charging port with USB 2 transfer speed. On the top of 13, there are two speakers and two more at the bottom. And the audio is slightly more hollow, unfortunately, compared to the smaller tablet. So the audio quality is not as good compared to the smaller tablet. And that's the power button. On this side, we have the volume controls, and at the bottom, we have the micro SD card slot and two more speakers. That's the USB-C charging port with USB 2 transfer speed. When listening to audio, voice is clearer on the smaller tablet, and on the bigger tablet, it feels like there is a piece of paper in front of the person talking or singing. There is a landscape camera here and a brightness sensor somewhere for auto brightness. Whether to get the bigger or smaller tablet really comes down to your budget and also what you intend to do with your tablet. Now, if you want something more portable, the 11-inch is noticeably more portable and way easier to handle because this is not that big and unwieldy. And this is the size of the tablet compared to an A5 size sketchbook. So you can see that this display is actually slightly larger than A5 size. So when you have a drawing app open, let me just open Mediabank Paint. You actually get a lot of space. You still get a lot of space to work with, even in landscape mode with one column of palette by the side. Now on the bigger tablet, obviously you get like a lot more space to work with, and even with one column of palette by the side, there is still a lot of space. Weight of this tablet is 682 grams, so it's quite heavy. It's very likely you have to set this down on a table or on some tablet stand for drawing, because this is not a tablet that you can hold and draw like this. This tablet is actually quite heavy. Weight of the smaller tablet is 500 grams, so this is still quite manageable. Noticeably lighter and just way easier to handle. So if you're looking for a tablet that is compact and portable that you can bring outdoors easily, 11 inch is the one to go for. Let's see how web pages look. By the way, the pen can be used on both tablets. So on the bigger tablet, you can see there is this 2-column layout, but on the smaller tablet, it's this tablet or phone-like layout. Now, if you are reading comics, I would actually recommend the 11 inch because this is still big enough for reading comics, as in the text is still big and comfortable enough for reading, and this is easier to handle. So when you're flipping through pages, when you're holding the tablet, it's just more comfortable. Whereas on the bigger tablet, well, you can feel the weight. So you will have to use 2 hands to hold the tablet while reading. And if I want to read comics on this tablet, I would still prefer to put this tablet on a tablet stand. Another advantage of the bigger display is you can use split screen mode more effectively. By the way, you may notice some color difference with the displays, and I will talk more about the color quality later. So for split screen, let me just open up Pinterest. Let's say I'm using a reference photo for Pinterest while I'm drawing. So let me just swipe up here, tap here to go into a split screen mode and open up Concepts, which is my favorite sketching app. And same thing, just swipe up, tap here, split screen, open up Concepts. And you can see there is quite a big difference. Here you can see a bigger reference image, and you also get a bigger drawing area. Depending on the app you use, the UI may or may not be cluttered with all those controls. So if you use an app with minimal user interface element, that is great because you still have a good amount of space to work with despite the UI taking up the space. But on the smaller tablet, it would be good to use drawing apps that have minimal user interface. Another nice thing about having such a big display is it works great as an external wireless display, and there are many wireless display apps that you can use with this tablet. Ultimately, if you're using the tablet mostly at home, 13 inch is fine. And now let's talk about the visual quality of the displays. So both are using LCD, and the resolution is high, so I don't really see much pixelation. This is the 11-inch display. So even when I look really close, it's difficult for me to see pixelation. And this is the 13-inch display, which also looks pretty sharp. Refresh rate of the smaller tablet is 90 Hz versus 60 Hz on the bigger tablet. So animations such as pan, zoom, and rotate will look smoother on the smaller tablet. Both displays have this matte glass surface, and I would consider the anti-glare to be quite aggressive, especially on the smaller display. So I'm not sure if the surface quality is similar with these two. What I mean by aggressive is when it diffuses the light or the reflection, it will create this white haze that makes the display looks bright and glaring. So when you're using the tablet outdoors and there is strong sunlight or there is strong light source against the display, this is quite glaring for at least my eyes. Now, if I compare the matte glass of this versus the Xiaomi Pad 7 tablet that I reviewed recently, notice how much more effective the anti-glare here is. Yeah, it is not the case of the brightness. Let me reduce the brightness down to maybe 50%. And even at 50% brightness, you can still see the diffuse reflection is not that aggressive. You can still see the content on the display quite clearly, and the diffuse reflection is not that bright and glaring. But for the Huion tablet, this is kind of glaring. And let me show you a matte screen protector just for comparison purposes. So this is a matte screen protector, and this is even more glaring. Yeah, this is almost unusable outdoors, at least for me. So this matte glass is, I would say, better for use indoors and away from strong light source. And that would apply to the bigger tablet as well. Now the bigger tablet actually has better anti-glare. I mean, it's quite obvious, right? Let me just hold these two tablets side by side and you can see. Because the anti-glare on this is not that aggressive, you can still see what's on the display. Whereas for the smaller display, this level of glare is not comfortable for my eyes. Anyway, when you're working with the tablets indoors or under shade, it's not really an issue. Now, when it comes to reading, the matte glass surface actually does provide this really nice reading experience, as long as you don't have the glare. So when I look at the display directly like this, the visuals look really good. The visuals look sharp. So the reading experience is, I would say, fantastic. All matte textured surfaces will introduce some grain, color noise, or shimmering effect. And on both the 11 and 13-inch displays, I see all of that is kept to a minimal. Let's talk about the color quality, which is noticeably better on the 13 for some reason. So you can see very clearly the colors are more vibrant, the colors look richer, and the contrast seems to be better. If you look at this area with the clouds, you can see the highlights are almost blown out, whereas on the 13 I can still see details for the clouds here, and the color here is very obviously just richer, more vibrant. By the way, there is auto brightness, which works quite well. The camera is here or there, depending on how you rotate the tablet. So when you're drawing, make sure your hand does not cover the brightness sensor, otherwise the display will just become dim. There is not much you can do with color tweaking. So when you tap here under colors inside the Android settings, you are brought to this page where there is a radio button here. But I mean, what does it do? Both displays are LCD and there is, I would say, noticeable IPS glow compared to higher quality LCD displays such as on the iPad Pro, where the glow is not that obvious. Here you can see the glow is kind of obvious. Let's take a look at this color wheel on the LCD of the Kamvas Slate 11, 13 and on the OLED display of the iPad Pro. So I can see there are some issues with the 13. On the 13, some of the colors are difficult to differentiate. For example, with yellow, green and green, these two colors look very similar. Same applies to mauve and violet. These two colors are quite similar. But if you look at the 11, the colors or the hues, they are easier to differentiate from one another. So the colors on the Kamvas Slate 11 actually look alright, and I would say it's even comparable to what I have here on the OLED display. It's just that earlier I mentioned there's this issue which seems to be a contrast issue, so it's not a color issue. Another issue with the larger tablet is it can be difficult to differentiate the different values or the saturation. So the colors in the inner wheel are supposed to be less saturated. Colors outside are supposed to be more saturated. But you can see the difference between the different steps in terms of value and saturation is not as obvious compared to the smaller tablet. On this tablet, all the colors seem to be just richer. Huion mentions color support for 99% sRGB and contrast ratio of 1000 to 1. But from what I can see, there seems to be some contrast issues with the smaller tablet and some color issues with the larger tablet. I have reviewed many monitors and tablets, and I can tell you that a true 99% sRGB display actually will look really good. So there's something off about these two displays. Time for the line test, and the app that I'm using is Medibank Paint. And as I write these letters, I can see noticeable latency. So this app usually has very noticeable latency. Let me draw a bit slower. So even when I'm drawing quite slowly, I can see latency and I can see some diagonal line wobble. And this app is Concepts, which has better latency performance. So the gap between the line as it's chasing the pen tip is actually much smaller. And this is a diagonal line, and you can see very noticeable diagonal line wobble. The pen performance is similar on the 11 and 13-inch tablet. So let's go back to Medibank Paint and test the initial activation force. So this is a 70 pixel brush, and now I'm going to draw with minimal pressure. Notice the line break. The pen is actually glancing on the display surface, but if I use minimal pressure, the lines will break. So the initial activation force of this pen is actually quite high, which is to say that I have to press down harder to get a line, like this. And if I press down hard to get a line, the line will be thick. So it's difficult to draw thin lines when you have a thick brush selected with this particular pen. Let me use a straight edge to help me draw a straighter line. So you can see as the pen is near the display, there is this cursor. So let's draw here. Yes, there is noticeable diagonal line wobble. And with certain apps, this wobble or jitter will be more obvious compared to other apps. So this issue with the diagonal line wobble and high initial activation force is going to affect accuracy. Next, let's look at the tapered strokes, which actually looks pretty good. Next, we have line transition from thin to thick and back to thin. And this is a diagonal line as well, so you can see some diagonal line wobble. So as I use minimal pressure here, with the pen tip still in contact with the glass, with the display, you can see the line will break because of the high initial activation force. So I have to press down harder to get the line to not break. Same applies here. So with this pen, as mentioned earlier, it's difficult to draw thin lines if you have a thick brush selected. And this is line consistency. I'm trying to maintain consistent line width by maintaining consistent pressure. And this is also a diagonal line, so I can see diagonal line wobble. If I draw faster, yes, the lines will be smoother. But sometimes you want to draw slow because you want to draw more accurately, and that is where you will see the diagonal line wobble come and affect accuracy. Let's draw some dots. Not much issues. And lastly, we have the cursor misalignment test. Oops. Palm rejection, as you can see, does not work well. So for this particular app, notice the strange zoom in and also the navigation. That is also due to the palm rejection not working well. So this is the cursor misalignment test, where I will draw separate lines and try to join the lines by looking at where the pen tip is, not where the cursor is. So if there are any issues with cursor misalignment, the lines will either overshoot or there would be gaps with the lines. Gaps like this, but this is actually due to human error. So let me just draw a bit more carefully here. Yeah, so I don't really have any issues with cursor misalignment. So the cursor is always underneath the pen tip. And now let's draw something very quickly while I talk more about the drawing experience. And once again, I'm using the app MIDI-Bang, and I'm going to create some drafting lines first. Okay, so we have the drafting lines down. Let's reduce the opacity. So I'm drawing on the 13-inch tablet, and later on I will switch over to the smaller tablet. And for this sketch, let's try to also make very obvious effort to put my palm on the display while I am drawing, just to test the palm rejection. So I am drawing a vehicle because whenever I test a tablet that has issues with diagonal line wobble, I will draw geometric shapes such as vehicles, furniture, buildings, anything that has geometric shapes that are angular with lots of diagonal lines. Those are the subjects I will draw when I'm testing tablets that have issues with diagonal line wobble. Okay, so I'm using this 53 pixel brush. So I'm actually trying to draw thin lines here. So it's difficult. So if I want to draw thin lines, I have to manually reduce the brush size to help me draw the thin lines more easily. Otherwise, the lines will be thick. Okay, so now you can see this thin line. Oops, there's one missing headlight here because of the accidental palm rejection. So sometimes when I place my palm on the display, there will be the accidental palm rejection, which may activate either a pan or accidentally zoom somewhere, or sometimes it will activate undo. And when it activates undo, like what had happened earlier, I was drawing this and it activated undo, and this headlight went missing. So it's good that I discovered that headlight is missing now, but the thing is, when you are drawing, if you don't realize that there is something missing until much later on, it could be an issue. This is 60 meg. Oops, that is what will happen. I have to set the redo. Let me redo here. Okay, redo there. Yeah, so that can happen. So if you do not want the accidental palm rejection issues, wear the artist glove that is included, or disable the double tap undo. Because without the double tap undo, you will not get the accidental undos. But if you disable the double tap undo, then you won't be able to, use double tap to undo. You have to find workarounds when it comes to drawing on this tablet. So here you can see me drawing diagonal lines, and there is diagonal line wobble and jitter. I'm not too bothered by the latency. You can see the line chasing the pen tip, but I'm actually not too bothered by the latency. But I'm very bothered by the accidental undo. So as I zoom out, I can see the slight wobble, but it's not too bad. Later I will show you Infinity Painter, which is a very picky app. Yeah, I like the matte textured surface, and I also like the anti-glare, which looks great. I mean, I have a strong light source, a big window on the left, and you can see there are no reflections and it's not that glaring. Let me use the bucket. You know, if you have a sensitive pen, you can actually just press down hard to fill in the colors with the broad stroke using pressure sensitivity. But if you have a pen that doesn't react well with pressure, to draw thin lines, you have to change the brush size. To draw thick lines, you have to change the brush size. So you have to go back to change the brush size quite often. But if you have a sensitive pen, you can actually just choose like a thick brush, 70 pixel brush for example, and use that single brush for the whole drawing. And you will still be able to create thin and thick lines, create lines with line variation. This is the 11-inch tablet. The drawing area may be smaller, but this is still, I'll say, big enough for comfortable drawing. Let me erase. So let's try the eraser button. Okay, this is not the eraser button. This is the eyedropper button. So it seems like for this app, I cannot customize the pen button. So it's the eyedropper, it's not the eraser. Now this app does not provide any stabilization for the pen. You can actually increase the stabilization to make the lines look smoother, but the downside is you will add more latency. So the latency is going to be even more obvious. Yeah, so as I try to draw this thin line that goes across the bottom, with minimal pressure, because I really want that thin line, you can see that certain areas, the lines will break. The next app I want to show you is Clip Studio Paint. So this is a big app. It's going to take some time to launch, but once it's launched, up and running, the performance is smooth. Yeah, you can see it takes some time to launch. And for some reason, this is actually using the phone UI. The 13-inch tablet is using the desktop user interface. So you can see, you can see palettes on the left, right. Let me just hide this. When the menu bar exists, you know that this is the desktop user interface. You can switch to simple mode. Where is it? Here. And this simple mode is different from this. I don't know what this mode is. So this is actually the real simple mode for tablets. We have the slider at the bottom, toolbar on the left, palette on the right, layers on the right. And if I switch over to studio mode again, this is a very familiar UI for people who use Clip Studio. For the smaller tablet, there is no way to switch to this desktop UI. And this is the pen performance you can expect with Clip Studio Paint. I have reduced the stabilization to 0. I'm using the G pen with a 31 pixel brush to get the thin and thick lines, and you can see the line breaks when I'm drawing with minimal pressure. There is pressure variance, and there is diagonal line wobble, line breaks again, pressure variance. If there is diagonal line wobble, if there's too much diagonal line wobble, you can increase the smoothness of the brush. And this app is in Infinite Painter. This is a very picky app, so if your pen performance is not good, the line quality will be quite bad. Yep. Very noticeable jitter and wobble with pressure variance. This is not that great. Medibank actually performs better than this, and this is also without stabilization, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, without any smoothness, so no stabilization. Let's increase the stabilization, just so you can see. Let's increase it to maybe 25 out of 100. Okay, let's undo here. Oh, the line is now straighter. Yeah, smoother and straighter. This is good. If you draw, yeah, this is actually not too bad. I mean, the latency is still not too bad for drawing. Okay, once you increase the stabilization, the lines actually look straighter. Yeah, so this is now a bit more usable for drawing. Let's look at tilt sensitivity with Infinite Painter. So if I tilt the brush, oops, tilt is not working here. You can see the cursor is like going crazy there. Yeah, so tilt doesn't work consistently or predictably with this app. This app is Sketchbook and it usually works quite well with tilt brushes. So when I tilt this, you can see tilt actually works. Let me reduce the tilt slightly. Okay, let me tilt down again. So the tilt transition from thin to broad to extra broad is not that smooth. Let me try again. We have diagonal lines which look okay here. Let me tilt the brush down, tilt it up slightly to get slightly better, thinner strokes. Okay, so tilt works a bit better here compared to with Infinite Painter. Let's look at this app Concepts, which is actually my main drawing app. So the performance will vary depending on which brush you use. For this dynamic pen, which reacts with pressure, we can see again diagonal line wobble, but pressure sensitivity actually works fine. Next, I want to show you the pencil. Notice how straight the pencil is, how smooth the line is. Yes, there is some wobble and jitter, but it's disguised or camouflaged by the texture of the pencil. This pencil also reacts with tilt, but you can see tilt doesn't really work that well, so just don't expect tilt to work well with this pen. So Concepts actually works quite well with this pen, with this particular pencil brush. It disguises or camouflages the diagonal line wobble really well. So as I draw this, you can see the lines are smooth. I don't see like obvious diagonal line wobble. I think maybe the app probably has a lot of stabilization, but I did not enable any stabilization for this brush. Yeah, so for quick sketching like this, let me undo that. Okay, I should put my palm on the display to draw so that you guys can see where that palm rejection will work well. Okay, I'm drawing a marketplace. Oh, one accidental line, second accidental line undo, which is what? Third accidental line undo, fourth, fifth. Yeah, so 5 times in a row for undo is going to make you extremely frustrated. So now I'm not even resting my palm on the display. But I do want that double tap undo because it's so convenient, but I cannot rest my palm on the display. Okay, let's have the shirt like this, another shopper on the left side. I'm going to place my pinky finger on the display. So sometimes as I've set the single finger to move the canvas, So sometimes you can see the canvas move, and that's because of the single there, the single one finger move. Okay, we have the one finger move again, but at least it's not introducing any stray strokes. Okay, we have this other sharper, oops. Yeah, if you want the best like drawing experience, for this app, I may also want to disable this finger action. Do nothing. Yeah, so now when I rest my palm on the display, it's not going to activate undo, it's not going to move the canvas. So palm rejection now, oops, did I disable? No, I did not disable that. So I've disabled everything, all the finger gestures. So now I shouldn't have any issues with finger gestures. Okay, so the gestures or the lack of gestures should give me good drawing experience right now. Yeah, so this is good for quick sketching. No issues with diagonal line wobble here for this brush. And this actually works surprisingly well for shading. So I can shade like this. See, it works really well for shading. Let me put the mic closer. So the pen tip gliding on the display on the matte glass surface actually makes this really nice sound. That's the tilt activating accidentally. Let me just undo. I cannot undo because I disabled that. So I have to use the button. So some apps, actually not many apps work well with this pen. Even for concepts, it's only this brush, the pencil brush, that works well with this pen. So here's a sketch of my two daughters, Tricia and Tiffany. So I did not have any issues with the line art for this pencil brush. You can see the lines, they are quite smooth. I did not have any issues with the coloring, and I used the pastel brush for coloring. I'm using the finger pen here because I have enabled it, but if I'm drawing, I have to disable it, otherwise palm rejection is going to act up. These were all drawn with the pencil brush, and these are all scenes from Hong Kong, drawn from reference photos. So for this sketch, we mostly have vertical lines and horizontal lines, not much or not many diagonal lines. There are some diagonal lines here, but you can see they are quite straight. And the lines here are thinner because I reduced the brush size manually. And for this sketch, the lines, actually for all these sketches, the lines came out the way I expect them to. So I did not have any issues or difficulty sketching all this. Let's have a close-up at this. I managed to join all the lines properly without leaving gaps and without the lines overshooting. So you can see this is without gaps and without the lines overshooting. By gaps, I mean things like this. There is a gap here, but otherwise, most of the lines, they join properly without issues. And here you can see me use the shading technique to make the background darker. And here I shaded a few times, layers over layers, to make this darker. And here you can see the line art, it's actually intentional wobble, so that it looks more, how should I say, expressive. But otherwise you can get smooth lines with this pencil brush, no problem at all. Battery life for the 11-inch is around 10 hours at maximum brightness, and for the 13-inch it's around 7 to 8 hours at maximum brightness. So the battery life for both tablets is actually quite good. Alright, to conclude, I think the hardware for both tablets is okay. I wish the color support and contrast can be better. I love the matte textured surface, which is really wonderful to draw on, and also the anti-glare is okay. I like the 90 Hz refresh rate, but unfortunately for the larger tablet, it's just 60 Hz refresh rate. The pen performance is not good and palm rejection doesn't work well, so the drawing experience is not ideal. So it is what it is. Yeah, I don't really have much to say except if Huion can actually use their own Huion pen tag instead of the USI-like pen tag, that would make the drawing experience so much better. So right now only very limited apps work well with this pen. Concepts actually works pretty well with this app, but only with the selected pencil brush. These tablets are definitely not good enough for professionals, but for casual use, casual drawing for kids, they are alright. Okay, I hope this review is useful. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video. Bye.